Star Trek Online originally released in 2010 for PC and later came to console in 2016. Currently, it's a free-to-play multiplayer RPG that has both ground and ship combat that features voice actors from the cast of Deep Space Nine, Voyager, The Next Generation, and Discovery. In my opinion, Star Trek Online has some of the best Star Trek storytelling in recent years, but it is held back by its aged and janky combat and visuals. So, is Star Trek Online worth checking out? This review will answer that question. If you're enjoying the content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like or comment on this video. Let's begin with the graphics and technicals of Star Trek Online. The game is old. It's been out for nearly 15 years and it shows. It looks and plays like an early MMORPG, and the updates for the game can only do so much. But the frame rate is steady and I had very few bugs or crashes. Most of the ones I did have were due to server shenanigans. However, you will have characters and NPCs glitching out, shooting at things that aren't there, weapons won't register damage at times, and you will clip through or get stuck on objects. All these things you would expect from an old game. For graphics, it's not great. The ground combat in particular is bad, with flat environments and character models that lack a lot of detail. But it's fine for what it is. You can see on the gameplay I'm showing for yourself. But what Star Trek Online does really well is recreating the Star Trek universe. The ships are highly detailed and customizable, giving you control to make the exact kind of vessel you want. You can even switch out parts from different versions within a class to make something kind of unique. Could it be improved? Sure. I would have liked to have the ability to make my own class of ship, sort of like Starfield's ability to mix and match parts to make your own ship from a bunch of different options. But Star Trek Online gives you a ton of classes to choose from, most being able to be purchased for free as you level up your character. The galaxy in Star Trek Online is huge, and you will be warping across sectors and quadrants to new locations recreated from the television series. Deep Space Nine makes an appearance, as well as Voyager and the Enterprise. There are some problems with scale. Things are way bigger inside than they should be, but that's a limitation from the camera and it's understandable. Overall, Star Trek Online isn't a looker, but it gets the job done.
I can't believe we're finally doing this. Look at that. The USS Vesta, first of her class. She's got subsystem targeting, a crew of 750, auxiliary phaser cannons, and even a quantum field focus controller. I can't wait to captain one someday. But here's our ship. Miranda class, 200 crew, 2 forward weapon mounts, 1 aft, average speed, warp 5.0. She's a tough little ship though. I think I like her.
I want to talk about the story in Star Trek Online, because that is one of the best things about this game. If you're a fan of Star Trek The Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine, the last few years haven't exactly been great. The new Star Trek series have made a lot of story retcons and questionable decisions that have taken the franchise in an entirely different direction. Think more pew 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 and frantic high-paced action, and less slowly observe a scientific phenomenon and come up with reasonable solutions to the problem. Star Trek Online takes a different approach. It's a video game, so it has its own focus on action and conflict, as well as a breakneck pace, but the story is really good, and it's like a love letter to the old Star Trek television series that I grew up on. It certainly helps that a lot of the cast shows up again, continuing storylines past the show that answers some questions like, what happened after Voyager's return home? Or, did Bajor end up joining the Federation? The story has you creating a character, either Federation, Klingon, or Romulan. I played as a Federation, which seems like how the game is geared towards, but the Klingon and Romulan characters are very viable and have their own introductory campaigns to get you started. The game takes place in the early 25th century, the same time period that Star Trek Picard is set in, but this game ignores the Picard series for its own story. Romulus and Remus have been destroyed by the star-going supernova, the same as what happened in the 2009 Star Trek movie, but unlike in Picard where the Romulans are refugees, the Romulans and Remans in Star Trek Online have split into two separate groups. There is the lingering Romulan Star Empire, led by Empress Scylla from the TNG series, and the Romulan Republic that came out of the Vulcan reunification movement. If you choose a Romulan character, you are part of the Republic who are allied with the Federation against the Empire. In this universe, the Federation and the Klingon Empire are at war again, and the events of this war sets the stage for your character. There are some major issues with the early storylines of Star Trek Online. Many of the missions and quests were removed in order to revamp and improve the story, but they were not put back into the game, leaving a lot of the story disjointed in the beginning. It's one of those games that has you saying, just get through the first 20 hours or so of the game and it starts getting better. The first chunk of Star Trek Online as a Federation player has you graduating from the Academy and becoming an ensign and first officer on a Miranda-class starship. Now originally, the Klingons would attack this ship and your captain would be killed, putting you in command. Now, after a revamp, the Borg attack and assimilate your captain, putting you in the captain's seat of the Miranda class to get him back. The USS Voyager and Captain Janeway make a reappearance, and you eventually succeed. From there, the missions and quests of Star Trek Online take an episode structure that feels like a television show, with each having similar title cards as the TNG series. Think of the story structure in this game as a season of a television show, with the missions inside of it as episodes within that season. Season 1 of Star Trek Online is the ongoing Klingon War, where you have to try to put a stop to this conflict that culminates with you fighting a world-destroying machine that the Klingons were going to use against the Federation. In my opinion, the story isn't really very good until you get a few seasons in, and the Iconian War starts. Basically, the Iconians are trying to get everyone to fight each other, and after opening up a gateway to the Delta Quadrant, things go really crazy. I'm not going to get too far into the storyline, but it will take you about 70 or 80 hours to get through the entire thing. Some parts of it are better than others, with time travel, alternate universes, a continuation of the Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and TNG series, the list goes on. Plus, it's all free, with voice acting from the original cast and some really good writing. Sure, the beginning of the game is rough, but if you stick with it, it gets really good.
Still no response from the break-even captain.
Scan them. Maybe they're unable to respond to our signal.
Captain, our shields are collapsing.
Flores, return fire. Pattern Delta Sierra 9.
Well, there go the shields. Not good.
Okay, let's talk about the gameplay. Star Trek Online is old and it feels like it. Gameplay is divided into two parts, space combat and ground combat. The ground combat just sucks. It's janky and doesn't work or feel right. You outfit your away party with weapons, shields, and items, and use abilities to fight your way through enemies. It's kind of like KOTOR, but not as good. I found myself not enjoying the ground missions at all, and it's hard because half the game takes place in these environments. In my opinion, it's where Star Trek Online shows its age the most, and it could really do with a revamp, but that's never going to happen. But the ship combat is pretty good. You have so many abilities to choose from, with a bunch of different beam weapons, torpedoes, and disruptors to choose from. The type of ship you choose makes a difference, with them being separated into basically a tough but slow cruiser, a fast and hard-hitting glass cannon escort, and a science vessel that does a little bit of everything. That's just the free ships, which you have the option of picking from every 10 levels. The ships become more powerful as you advance. You start with an old and weak Miranda class that has just 2 front weapons and 1 rear. But from the Miranda class, I got a Nova class science ship, familiar to anyone who watched Voyager and seen the Equinox. Then an Akira class escort, which is famous for being on the front lines of the Dominion War. Then a Galaxy class, like the Enterprise D from TNG. Then finally a Sovereign class, like the Enterprise E. At that point in the game, ships open up more and you really have a choice from a ton of different options. Let's go into the missions themselves. Like I said before, they play like episodes from a television show. You generally receive a message from Starfleet or another character telling you to go somewhere and investigate something. You arrive and usually things hit the fan. One thing that is hard to believe is the fact that your little Miranda class at the start can fight through waves of other ships. If you're a fan of Deep Space Nine like I am, you know that Miranda classes get tore up pretty good in combat. But here, all your ships are pretty tough. The game has some difficulty spikes, with you either easily killing everything in sight or dying multiple times. If you do die, you just respawn after a little while with no real penalties, so you can power through even the toughest situations. Overall, the gameplay is dated but pretty fun, if you can suffer through the ground combat and the early game.
I realize the odds are against us here. We're facing an enemy with a power level unheard of. But there is still hope. We have a plan.
A plan, Admiral? How do you intend to defeat a being of godlike power?
We have established contact with someone who knows the Emperor well. We believe they hold the key to victory in this conflict. We're ready. Energize.
I want to talk about the pros and cons of Star Trek Online. For the pros, the game is completely free, and you can easily get up to 100 hours of playtime without spending any money at all. The endgame content can be a bit grindy, and you're encouraged to spend money on the advanced ships, but you don't have to get involved with that stuff if you don't want to. The ships themselves are really great, they're highly detailed, and a lot of the fan favorites from the Star Trek series make a reappearance. If you are a fan of new Trek, like Discovery and Strange New Worlds, content from those shows have been added as well. A lot of the original cast makes a return, and I loved seeing continuations of storylines from Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and The Next Generation. But for the cons, the game is old and pretty janky. You need to power through the early content, and a lot of it will leave you confused because chunks have been ripped out. Some parts of the game assume you are a huge fan of Star Trek, and it might not give you context for some of the things happening. The late game stuff requires either a lot of time or money, more of one if you don't want to spend a lot of the other. And that's it for another review. Is Star Trek Online worth playing? Absolutely, if you're a fan of Star Trek. But if you're just looking for a fun space combat game, there are better ones out there. But this game gives a true Star Trek experience with great storylines that fans will love. I'm the Casual Console Gamer, and I'll see you all in the next review.